Ethan stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of his Manhattan penthouse, watching the city lights flicker below like scattered stars. It was past 10, but sleep felt impossible. The silence in the apartment was heavy, too heavy for a place that usually buzzed with energy, late-night calls, and the hum of ambition. Tonight, though, the only sound was the soft ticking of the antique clock on the marble mantel and the distant wail of a siren somewhere down on Fifth Avenue. He turned when he heard footsteps. She walked in barefoot, wearing one of his oversized shirts, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. Her eyes were tired but warm, the kind of look that used to calm him instantly. Now it made his chest tighten. "You're still up," she said softly, stopping a few feet away. He nodded but didn't say anything. He couldn't. Not yet. She came closer, sensing something was off. "Is everything okay? Did something happen with the board?" He shook his head. "No, nothing like that." She studied his face, then reached for his hand. Her fingers were warm, familiar. "Then talk to me." He looked down at their joined hands, then back at her. His throat felt dry. I need to tell you something." She waited, patient as always. That was one of the things he loved most about her. Her quiet strength, the way she never rushed him, never made him feel small for his fears. He took a deep breath. "I'm scared." "Of what?" she asked gently. "Of this." He gestured vaguely between them, then toward the world beyond the window. "Of failing. Of not being enough. Of becoming like him." She knew who he meant. His father, absent, unreliable, gone before Ethan turned 10. A man who promised the moon but left behind only broken promises and unpaid bills. Ethan had spent his whole life running from that shadow, building walls of success so high he thought they'd keep the past out forever. She squeezed his hand. "You're nothing like him. You've worked so hard. You've built something real. But what if I mess it up?" His voice cracked. "What if I can't handle it all? The company, the pressure. And now this?" She paused. Her eyes searched his, then softened with understanding. She placed her other hand on her stomach, just barely rounded, barely noticeable to anyone else, but he'd seen the change. He'd seen the way she'd been tired in the mornings, the way she smiled when she thought no one was looking. "I'm pregnant," she whispered, as if saying it out loud made it more real. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. He pulled his hand away without thinking. His breath came faster. His vision blurred at the edges. She didn't flinch. She just stood there waiting for him to catch up. "I didn't plan this," she said quickly, "but I'm not scared. Not really. I know it's unexpected, but it's also kind of beautiful, isn't it? We're going to be parents." He stared at her, at the hope shining in her eyes, and all he felt was panic. Beautiful? How could it be beautiful when he didn't even know how to be a decent partner, let alone a father? He'd spent years proving he could succeed in a cutthroat world, but fatherhood wasn't about deals or deadlines. It was about showing up day after day with patience and love, things he wasn't sure he had. "I can't," he said suddenly, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. Her smile faded. "What do you mean you can't?" "I can't do this, not now. Maybe not ever." Her face fell. "Ethan, we're in this together. You don't have to do it alone." But that was the problem. He felt alone. Even standing right next to her, he felt miles away. The weight of his past, the pressure of his present, it all crashed down at once. "I need space," he said, voice low. "I need to figure things out." She blinked, confused. "Space? You're talking about our baby. You can't just walk away from that." "I'm not walking away," he insisted, though even he knew it sounded hollow. "I just need time." She didn't argue. She never did. Instead, she nodded slowly, her eyes glistening. "Okay," she said quietly. "Take your time," but he didn't take time. He ran. The next morning, he told his assistant to cancel all personal appointments. He moved into a hotel under a different name. He stopped answering her calls. Blocked her number after the 10th voicemail, each one softer, more broken than the last. He told himself it was temporary, that he'd come back when he was ready. But days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. The IPO went through. The company's valuation soared. Reporters called him a visionary. Investors praised his focus. No one knew he spent nights staring at the ceiling, wondering if she was okay. If she'd kept the baby. If she hated him. He told himself she was better off without him. That he was sparing her and the child from his mess. From the chaos inside him that he couldn't control. He didn't attend the wedding they'd planned, didn't send a note, didn't even drive past her building, though he knew the address by heart. Months later, through a mutual friend who didn't know they'd split, he heard she'd moved out of the city. Started over somewhere quieter. He didn't ask for details. He didn't deserve them. What he didn't know, what he couldn't have guessed, was that she was carrying not one child but two. That the fertility clinic had transferred 2 embryos during her last cycle, and both had taken. That she'd given birth to twins, a boy and a girl, on a rainy Tuesday in March, all by herself in a hospital room with only her sister holding her hand. He didn't know she'd named the girl after her grandmother and the boy after a poet she loved. He didn't know she'd cried every night for weeks, not out of sadness but out of sheer exhaustion and fear, and he definitely didn't know that even in her darkest moments she never once wished the children away. She just kept going. Meanwhile, Ethan climbed higher. Bought a bigger penthouse, dated models and executives who admired his success but never saw the emptiness behind his eyes. He gave interviews about discipline and vision, never mentioning the hole in his chest that no amount of money could fill. He told himself he'd made the right choice. That walking away was the most responsible thing he could do. That love wasn't enough if you couldn't be the person someone needed. But deep down in the quiet hours before dawn, he knew the truth. He hadn't walked away to protect her. He'd run because he was afraid of failing, afraid of being ordinary, afraid that if he let himself be vulnerable, the whole carefully constructed life he'd built would come crashing down. And so he stayed gone. He didn't see the ultrasound photos she'd saved in a drawer. Didn't hear the twins' first laughs. Didn't feel the weight of a tiny hand in his. 4 years passed like that, him building empires, her building a home. And then, one ordinary afternoon in Central Park, everything changed, but that was later. For now, in that penthouse 4 years ago, all he knew was fear, and all she knew was heartbreak. He left without saying goodbye. She stayed and chose to love anyway. The city kept spinning. Life moved on, but some choices echo louder than others, and his was just beginning to find its way back to him. The day she packed up the penthouse, rain tapped against the windows like it was crying for her. She didn't cry, not then. She folded clothes into boxes, wrapped dishes in newspaper, and boxed up photo frames without looking at them. Each item felt heavy, not because of its weight, but because of what it represented. A future that had vanished overnight. She'd waited weeks after he disappeared. At first she told herself he needed space. Then she told herself he'd come back when he calmed down. But as the days stretched into silence, the truth settled in like cold air seeping through a cracked window. He wasn't coming back, and she was alone. With a baby growing inside her. Her family didn't ask questions when she showed up at her sister's doorstep with 2 suitcases and tired eyes. They just opened the door, made her tea, and let her sleep for 12 hours straight. Her mother held her hand the next morning and said, "You're not alone, mija. Not ever." That simple sentence became her anchor. She moved into a small 1-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn. Nothing fancy. Just clean walls, a kitchen that smelled like old wood, and a fire escape where she could sit and watch the sunset. Rent was tight, but she'd always been good with budgets. She picked up extra hours tutoring after school, stayed late grading papers, and even started selling handmade bookmarks online just to cover diapers and prenatal vitamins. The pregnancy wasn't easy. Morning sickness lasted well into her 2nd trimester. Some days she'd throw up before work and still force herself to stand in front of a classroom full of 7-year-olds with a smile on her face. She never let them see her tired, never let them see her scared. When the contraction started, she was alone in the apartment. Her sister was stuck in traffic. She called an Uber, clutching her hospital bag like a lifeline, and made it to the delivery room just in time. 12 hours later, she held her daughter for the first time. Tiny fingers curled around hers, eyes wide and curious, as if she already knew the world hadn't been kind to her mama. But she was here anyway. She named her Sophia, but the story didn't end there. A week after Sophia was born, the doctor called with news that made her sit down hard on the edge of the bed. "We just got the final embryo report back from the clinic," he said gently. "There were 2 viable embryos transferred during your last cycle. Both implanted." She stared at the phone, stunned. "But I only had 1 baby." "No," the doctor said. "You had twins. Sophia has a brother. He was just smaller, born a little later, a little quieter. But he's here. She burst into tears, not from shock but from overwhelming love. She'd been raising one child thinking that was her whole world. And there was another piece of her heart she hadn't even met yet. They brought Leo to her the next day, a fragile, sleepy boy with the same dark lashes as his sister. He fit perfectly in the crook of her arm like he'd been waiting for her all along. Now she had two. Two mouths to feed, two hearts to protect, two reasons to keep going when every bone in her body ached for rest. Money was tighter than ever. She stretched every dollar, buying second-hand clothes, cooking big pots of beans and rice that lasted days, skipping coffee so she could afford formula. Some nights she'd rock both babies in the dim light of the living room, whispering, "We're gonna be okay," more to herself than to them. But she meant it. She refused to let bitterness take root. She never cursed his name in front of the kids, never told them their father abandoned them. Instead, she filled their days with stories, songs, and bedtime rituals. She read to them every night, even when her voice was hoarse and her eyes burned from lack of sleep. As the twins grew, so did her strength. She went back to school online, late at night after they were asleep, to get her master's in education. She wanted more than survival. She wanted to build something real, something that would last. During a parent-teacher conference, she noticed how many kids in her school struggled with reading. Some came from homes with no books. Others had parents working 3 jobs just to keep the lights on. She remembered how reading had been her escape as a child, the library her sanctuary, so she started small. She collected gently used books from neighbors, friends, even strangers on social media. She set up a little book nook in her classroom with a sign that said, "Take one, leave one, or just keep it." Kids lit up when they could choose their own stories. That little idea grew. She applied for a tiny grant, partnered with a local cafe, and launched a weekend reading circle for kids in the neighborhood. Parents came, not just for the free books, but for the sense of community. For the first time in years, she felt like she was part of something bigger than her own pain. People started calling her the book lady. She didn't mind. It felt like a badge of honor. By the time the twins turned 2, she'd turned her side project into a nonprofit. She rented a small storefront with peeling paint and turned it into a bright, welcoming space filled with beanbags, shelves of books, and a corner just for toddlers. Volunteers showed up, retired teachers, college students, even a few dads who wanted their kids to love stories as much as she did. She still worked full-time as a teacher, but now she had purpose beyond the paycheck. She was building a legacy, not of wealth or fame, but of kindness, literacy, and hope. The twins thrived. Sophia was bold, always asking why, and climbing onto chairs to reach the top shelf. Leo was quieter, more observant, but his hugs were the kind that melted your worries away. They played together like best friends, shared toys without being asked, and fell asleep tangled in each other's arms every night. She filmed little videos of them, Sophia pretending to read to Leo giggling when she made silly voices, and posted them online, not for likes but to remember these moments. Life was messy. There were spilled juice boxes, tantrums in the grocery store, nights when she cried in the shower so they wouldn't hear. But it was also full. So full, she dated once briefly, a kind man from the community center who brought her coffee and listened when she talked. But when he asked about the kid's father, she froze. She didn't lie. She just said, "He's not in the picture." The man nodded, but something shifted between them. She realized she wasn't ready, not because she was waiting for him to come back, but because her heart was already full. She didn't need saving. She just needed space to keep growing. She never posted angry rants online, never demanded child support publicly. She handled everything quietly, legally, through proper channels. When a lawyer finally tracked down the father's company and sent papers, she didn't gloat. She just signed what she needed to and moved on. The money helped, paid for preschool, new shoes, a reliable stroller, but it wasn't about him. It was about giving her children stability. What she didn't know was that he'd received those papers, that he'd stared at the birth certificates, 2 names, 2 dates, 2 tiny footprints, and felt his world tilt on its axis. But that was his burden to carry, not hers. She focused on what she could control: bedtime routines, healthy meals, teaching the twins to say please and thank you, showing them how to be gentle with bugs and brave with new friends. On Sophia's third birthday, they had a small party in the bookstore. 10 kids, cupcakes with rainbow sprinkles, and a piñata shaped like a book. Leo shyly handed out party favors, mini notebooks with their names on them. She watched them laugh, run, and share, and for the first time in years she let herself feel proud, not just of them, but of herself. She'd been knocked down. She'd been left behind. But she hadn't stayed there. She'd built a life with her bare hands, brick by brick, book by book, hug by hug, and it was beautiful. Not perfect. Not easy, but real. Sometimes late at night she'd look at the twins sleeping and wonder what their father would think if he saw them now. Would he recognize his eyes in Sophia's face? His stubborn chin in Leo's profile? Would he be proud? Regretful? She didn't dwell on it. She couldn't, because her job wasn't to wonder about him, it was to be here, now fully, for them. And she was. Every scraped knee, every bedtime story, every packed lunch with a little note tucked inside, she gave it all with love. Not the flashy kind, but the quiet, steady kind that shows up day after day, even when no one's watching. 4 years had passed since that rainy day in the penthouse. She wasn't the same woman who'd packed those boxes in silence. She was stronger, wiser, kinder, and she had 2 little souls who called her Mama with all the trust in the world. That was enough, more than enough. It was everything. The office was quiet, too quiet for a place that usually buzzed with late-night strategy calls and the clack of keyboards. He sat alone at his desk, the city light stretching out below like a sea of distant stars. At 38, he owned more than most people dreamed of. A global company, a name in the headlines, homes in 3 countries. But none of it filled the hollow space inside him. It had been 4 years since he walked away. 4 years of building empires while ignoring the wreckage he'd left behind. He told himself he was doing the right thing, that staying away was the only way to protect her from his chaos, his fear, his brokenness. But lately the excuses rang hollow even to his own ears. It started with small things. A colleague mentioning his newborn twins at a dinner party, a commercial showing a dad teaching his daughter to ride a bike, a song on the radio about second chances. Each one pricked at him like a thorn he couldn't pull out. Then came the health scare. It wasn't serious, not really. Just high blood pressure, stress markers in his blood, a stern warning from his doctor. You're running on empty. If you don't slow down, your body will force you to. He'd laughed it off at first. He was used to pushing through. But that night, lying in bed with his heart pounding like a drum, he couldn't shake the thought, what if I die and they never know me? The word hit him like a wave. He hadn't let himself say it out loud in years. But now it was there, undeniable. He had children, 2 of them, and he didn't even know their names. He'd received the legal papers years ago, birth certificates, custody documents, a polite but firm request for child support. He'd signed the checks without reading the details, told his lawyer to handle it, buried the file in a drawer and never looked back. But now he needed to know, not to interfere, not to insert himself where he wasn't wanted, just to know they were okay. He called a private investigator the next morning, not one of the flashy types from movies, but a quiet, retired police officer who specialized in discreet family matters. I don't want contact, he said firmly. Just confirmation they're safe, healthy, happy. The man nodded. Understood. No photos unless you ask. No addresses. Just updates. Weeks passed. He tried to focus on work, but his mind kept drifting. He'd stare at spreadsheets and see a child's drawing in the margins. He'd hear laughter in the hallway and wonder if his daughter sounded like that. Did his son have his laugh? His mother's patience? Then one rainy Tuesday, the investigator called. They're doing well, the man said gently. She's built a good life. Runs a literacy nonprofit for kids in Brooklyn. The children are in preschool, bright, happy, loved. He exhaled, relief and guilt twisting together in his chest. Can I see them? He asked, voice barely above a whisper. There was a pause. I can send one photo. Taken in public. No intrusion. He agreed. The email arrived that evening. Subject line, update, public event. He almost didn't open it. His hand hovered over the mouse like it might burn him. But then he clicked. The photo was taken at a small outdoor book fair. She stood near a folding table covered in children's books, smiling as she helped a little girl pick out a story. And there, on either side of her, were 2 children, a boy and a girl. The girl had his eyes. Sharp, curious, wide with wonder. The boy had her gentle smile, but the same stubborn set to his jaw that he saw in the mirror every morning. They were holding hands. With each other. With her. His breath caught. He zoomed in, tracing their faces with his eyes like he could memorize them through the screen. The girl wore a yellow dress with a smudge of chocolate on the sleeve. The boy had mismatched socks, one blue, one green, and a tiny bandage on his knee. Real. Alive. His. Tears blurred his vision. He hadn't cried in years, not since he was a kid hiding in his room after his father left for good. But now, alone in his sterile office, he let it come. Great, heaving sobs that shook his whole body. He wasn't just seeing his children for the first time, he was seeing everything he'd thrown away. The joy, the mess, the ordinary magic of bedtime stories and scraped knees and shared ice cream cones. The kind of life money couldn't buy. But he'd walked away from anyway. He spent the next few days in a daze. He canceled meetings, ignored emails, sat by the window for hours staring at that single photo, imagining their voices, their favorite foods, the way they said mama. He started therapy again. Not the corporate wellness sessions his company offered, but real, weekly sessions with a therapist who didn't care about his net worth. I abandoned them, he said in their first meeting. Voice raw. The therapist didn't flinch. Why? Because I was afraid I'd be like my father. Absent, unreliable. I thought if I stayed away, I'd spare them that pain. And now? Now I realize, walking away was the pain. I didn't protect them. I hurt them. It was the first honest thing he'd said in years. Slowly, carefully, he began to unpack the fear that had ruled him for so long. He talked about his childhood, the empty chair at dinner, the broken promises, the way he'd sworn he'd never be that man. But in trying so hard not to repeat the past, he'd created a new kind of damage. His therapist asked him one question that stuck with him. What does being a good father look like to you? He thought about it for days. Not the Instagram version, no staged photos or perfect vacations, just the real stuff. Showing up, listening, being present even when it's hard, loving without expecting anything back. He didn't deserve that chance. But maybe he could earn it. He didn't reach out. Not yet. He knew she'd been through enough, that she'd built a life without him, and he had no right to barge in like he belonged. But he could prepare. He started small. He read books on child development, learned about age-appropriate toys, emotional regulation, the importance of routine. He donated anonymously to her nonprofit, enough to fund a new reading corner, but not so much it would raise suspicion. He set up a trust fund for the children, legally structured so it would cover their education, health care, and future needs, no strings attached. He wanted them to have security, even if he never got to hold them. Months passed. He kept his distance, but his heart was no longer in the boardroom. It was in a small Brooklyn bookstore in a yellow dress and mismatched socks. Then, on a whim, he booked a flight to New York. Not for business. Just to be near them, to breathe the same air. Even if he never spoke a word, he told no one. Checked into a quiet hotel under a different name. Spent his days walking neighborhoods he used to avoid. Tree-lined streets with strollers and barking dogs. Playgrounds filled with laughter. Cafes where parents sipped coffee while kids drew on napkins. He wasn't stalking. He wasn't lurking. He just needed to see for himself that they were real, that they were okay. And then, one golden afternoon in Central Park, he saw her. She was pushing a double stroller down a winding path, sunlight catching in her hair. The twins ran ahead chasing fallen leaves, their laughter carrying on the breeze. She called out, "Don't go too far," in that warm, firm voice he remembered so well. He froze, his heart hammered like he'd run a mile. He ducked behind a tree, not out of shame, though there was plenty of that, but out of respect. He didn't want to startle her, didn't want to ruin this perfect moment with his presence. He watched as she knelt to help the boy tie his shoe, her hands gentle and sure. Then she lifted the girl onto her shoulders and the child squealed with delight, tiny hands gripping her mother's wrists like she was the safest place in the world. He stood there, hidden in the shadows, tears streaming down his face, not from sadness but from awe. She'd done it. She'd raised them with love, with strength, with grace, and they were happy he didn't approach. He didn't call out. He just watched until they disappeared down the path, their voices fading into the rustle of autumn leaves. Later that night, back in his hotel room, he wrote a letter. Not an excuse, not a plea, just the truth. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I needed you to know I see you now, and I'm so sorry. I've set up a trust for them. It's theirs no matter what. I'll stay away unless you say otherwise. But if you ever want them to know me, even a little, I'll be ready. Not as the man I was, but as the father I'm trying to become. He slipped the letter, along with a simple key to the trust account, into an envelope. The next day he returned to the park, waited near the bench where he'd seen them. When she sat down to tie the boy's shoe again, he walked past quickly, dropped the envelope into her open tote bag, and kept walking. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. For the first time in years, he felt something other than regret. He felt hope, quiet, fragile, but real. And for now, that was enough. She didn't notice the envelope right away. It was tucked deep in her tote bag, under a half-eaten granola bar, a sippy cup, and a crumpled drawing Sophia had made that morning. 2 stick figures holding hands under a lopsided sun labeled Mama plus me. She only found it later that evening. After bath time, when she was sorting through the day's clutter on the kitchen table, the envelope had no return address. Just her name written in neat, careful handwriting, familiar but distant, like a song she hadn't heard in years but still knew by heart. Her stomach dropped. She knew who it was from before she even opened it. For a long moment, she just held it, staring at the paper like it might burn her fingers. Part of her wanted to throw it away unread, to protect the peace she'd built, the quiet rhythm of their little life. But another part, the part that still remembered the man he used to be, before fear swallowed him whole, needed to know. She took a breath and opened it. The letter was short, honest. No excuses, no grand declarations. Just regret and something else, something new. Responsibility. Not the kind that comes with money, but the kind that comes with humility. He didn't ask for anything, didn't demand a meeting or a phone call. He simply said he'd seen them in the park, that he was sorry, that he'd set up something for the kids, something secure, lasting, and that it was theirs no matter what she decided. At the bottom was a key. Not a house key. A small, unmarked metal key with a tag that read, Evergreen Trust, account number 734. She sat there for a long time, the twins asleep down the hall, the apartment quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. She didn't cry. She didn't yell. She just felt tired. Tired of carrying the weight of his choices. Tired of wondering what might have been. Tired of shielding her children from a ghost who'd only ever shown up in silence. But then she thought of Sophia's laugh, of Leo's quiet hugs, of the way they ran to her every morning like she was their whole world. And she realized this wasn't about him anymore. It never really was. It was about them. She called her lawyer the next day. Not out of anger, but caution. She needed to know if this was real, if it was safe, if it came with hidden strings. The lawyer checked, verified the trust, confirmed it was legitimate, irrevocable, and solely for the children's benefit. Education, health, future needs. No control. No conditions. Just support. He's not asking for visitation. The lawyer asked gently. No, she said, and I'm not offering it, but she didn't return the key. Weeks passed. Fall turned to winter. The twins started asking more questions. Where's my daddy? Sophia asked one night, coloring a family portrait at the kitchen table. Leo looked up from his blocks, waiting for the answer. She'd practiced this moment in her head 100 times. She put down her coffee and knelt beside them. Your daddy lives far away, she said softly. He wasn't ready to be a parent when you were born, but that doesn't mean he doesn't care. And it doesn't change how much I love you. You have me, and you have each other. And that's enough, Sophia frowned. But does he know about us? Yes, she said. He knows. She didn't lie. She didn't villainize. She just told the truth in a way small hearts could carry. That night, after tucking them in, she sat on the couch with the trust documents spread out on the coffee table. She thought about college, about braces, about music lessons and summer camps and all the little things that add up. This money could ease that burden. Not because she needed saving, but because her kids deserved every opportunity. Still, she hesitated. Accepting this felt like opening a door she'd carefully locked years ago. What if he changed his mind? What if he showed up one day expecting gratitude or worse, access? But then she remembered the letter, the quiet tone, the lack of demand. Maybe, just maybe, he'd changed. She decided to wait, to watch, to see if his actions matched his words. Meanwhile, life went on. One Saturday morning, she took the twins to the park near their bookstore. They loved the swings, the slide, the patch of grass where dandelions grew like tiny suns. As she pushed Sophia higher and higher, laughing at her squeals, she noticed a man sitting on a nearby bench reading a newspaper. He looked familiar. Not in a threatening way, just known, like a face from a dream. He didn't look at her, didn't glance at the kids, just sat quietly, turning pages, sipping coffee from a paper cup. Her pulse quickened. She kept pushing Sophia, but her eyes kept drifting back to him. After a few minutes, he folded the paper, stood, and walked away. Slow, calm, never once turning his head. She didn't follow. Didn't call out. But later, when she checked the community donation log for the bookstore, she saw a new entry, an anonymous gift that covered 6 months of rent. The note simply said, "For the kids." She knew. He wasn't trying to win her over. He wasn't making a show. He was just being there. In the background, quietly, consistently. That small act, so unlike the man she remembered, stirred something in her. Not forgiveness, not yet, but curiosity. One afternoon, while sorting through old files, she found a box she hadn't opened in years. Inside were photos from before everything fell apart. Picnics in the park, lazy Sundays, him laughing as she tried to teach him to cook. In one, he's holding her hand, eyes soft in a way she hadn't seen since. She didn't throw them away. She just tucked them back, heart aching not with anger but with the bittersweet ache of what could have been. Then came the snowstorm. It hit hard and fast, blanketing the city in white. Power went out in half the neighborhood. The bookstore's heater failed. She wrapped the twins in blankets, made hot chocolate on the gas stove, and tried not to panic. The next morning, a delivery arrived. A brand new space heater, heavy duty, with a note. For warmth. No reply needed. She stared at it, then at the sleeping faces of her children, safe and warm under layers of quilts. He was learning, not to fix things, not to take over, but to support. Spring arrived. The twins turned 4. She threw a small birthday party in the bookstore. Balloons, cupcakes, a puppet show. As she cleaned up afterwards, she found a package by the door. No note. Just a beautifully bound children's book titled, The Boy and the Girl Who Grew Stars. Inside on the first page, handwritten, "For Sophia and Leo, may your light always shine." She traced the words with her finger. Then for the first time, she did something she hadn't done in 4 years. She wrote back. Not a letter, just a photo. She took it the next day, Sophia and Leo sitting cross-legged on the bookstore rug, holding the book between them, grinning at the camera. On the back in her neat script she wrote, "They loved it." She didn't mail it. She left it with the bookstore manager, who nodded knowingly and said, "He comes by sometimes." Just sits in the back corner, reads, watches the kids during story hour. Never says a word. She didn't ask for details. She didn't need to. A week later she saw him, not in the park, not from a distance. He was standing outside the bookstore window just after closing time. Rain had started to fall, but he didn't move. He just watched through the glass as she wiped down tables as the twins played with stuffed animals in the reading nook. She saw him. And this time she didn't look away. Their eyes met for just a second, long enough for her to see the pain, the hope, the quiet plea in his gaze. Then he nodded once, turned, and walked into the rain. She didn't chase him. Didn't call out. But that night, as she tucked the twins into bed, Sophia asked, "Mama, was that our daddy outside today?" She paused. "Yes, is he nice?" She thought for a moment. "He's trying to be," Leo yawned. "Can he come to my birthday next year?" She kissed his forehead. "We'll see." It wasn't a promise, but it wasn't a no either. And for the first time in 4 years, the door wasn't closed, just slightly ajar. She went to the window later after the kids were asleep and looked out at the empty street. The rain had stopped. The city glistened under the streetlights. Somewhere out there he was walking, carrying his regret like a stone in his pocket, and somewhere in her heart, a tiny seed of something new was starting to grow. Not trust, not yet, but the possibility of it. She didn't know what came next. But for the first time, she was willing to find out, not for him, for them, for the boy with mismatched socks, for the girl who believed in stars, for the future they all deserved, even the one who'd once walked away, Kringas, had settled into the city like a soft blanket. Warm days, blooming trees, the kind of light that made everything feel possible. The bookstore was busier than ever, filled with the sound of children turning pages, parents chatting over coffee, and the twins running barefoot between shelves, their laughter echoing off the walls. Life had found its rhythm again, steady and full. She hadn't seen him in weeks, not since that rainy evening outside the window. But she knew he was still around. Small signs appeared like quiet footprints. A new shelf of bilingual books arrived with no invoice. The broken story hour microphone was mysteriously replaced, and once, she found a handwritten list of children's book recommendations tucked into the donation jar. Titles carefully chosen. Notes in the margins like, "Leo might like this one. It's about a quiet boy who saves the day." He wasn't pushing, wasn't demanding, just showing up in the ways that mattered. Then came the envelope, not slipped into her bag this time. Delivered by hand, left with the bookstore manager on a quiet Tuesday morning. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a small, wrapped box. The letter was brief. "I know I don't have the right to ask for anything, but if you're willing, I'd like to meet them. Not as their father, not yet. Just as someone who cares. I'll follow your lead. Your rules, your pace. No pressure, no expectations. Just a chance to say hello." At the bottom, he'd written a time and place, Saturday morning, the park near the bookstore. He'd be on the bench by the duck pond. If she didn't come, he'd understand. If she did, he'd be ready. She read it 3 times, then set it aside. That night after bedtime, she sat on the porch with a cup of tea, watching fireflies blink in the dusk. She thought about fear, how it had shaped both their lives. His fear of failing, her fear of being hurt again, and now the twins' innocent curiosity, untouched by the weight of the past. Sophia had asked again last week, "When can we meet Daddy?" Leo had added, "I drew him a picture. Can I give it to him?" Her heart ached, not from anger, but from love, for them, for the future they deserved, even if it included a man who'd once vanished. She didn't owe him forgiveness, but she owed her children honesty, and maybe a chance. Saturday morning arrived sunny and calm. She dressed the twins in their favorite outfits, Sophia in a bright red dress, Leo in his dinosaur t-shirt. She didn't tell them where they were going, just said, "We're meeting a friend." They walked to the park, hands swinging between them. As they neared the duck pond, she saw him. He was sitting on the bench wearing simple jeans and a plain shirt, no watch, no phone, nothing to hide behind. He looked older, softer around the edges, less polished, more human. When he saw them, he stood slowly, hands at his sides like he was afraid to move too fast. He didn't rush forward, didn't kneel dramatically, just waited. She stopped a few feet away. The twins looked up at her, sensing the shift in the air. "It's okay," she said gently. "This is someone who wanted to say hello." Sophia stepped forward first, bold as ever. "Are you our daddy?" He swallowed hard, nodded. "Yes, if you'll let me be." She studied him with serious eyes, then held out a crumpled piece of paper. "I made you this." He took it with trembling hands. It was a drawing, 3 stick figures under a rainbow. 2 small ones labeled "Me plus Leo," and a taller one with a question mark. Now someone had carefully written "Daddy" over it in crayon. He looked up, eyes glistening. "Thank you," he whispered. Leo hung back, clutching his own drawing. A rocket ship with 3 seats. After a moment, he walked over and handed it to him. "This is for you," he said softly, "so you don't get lost again." The words hit like a stone in still water. He crouched down, not too close, just enough to be at their level. "I won't," he said, voice thick. "I promise." She watched from a few steps away, heart pounding. Not with fear, but with something like hope. They didn't hug. Didn't call him Dad, but they talked. Sophia asked if he liked pancakes. He did. Leo wanted to know if he could whistle. He tried and failed, making them giggle. He answered every question honestly, never pretending, never overreaching. After 20 minutes, she gently said, "We should go." He stood. "Thank you," he said to her, then to them. "For today," she nodded. "We'll see, it wasn't a promise of more, but it wasn't a goodbye either." As they walked home, Sophia chattered about how he had the same nose as her. Leo held her hand tighter than usual, and she felt something shift inside her. Not a wall coming down, but a door opening just enough to let light in. Weeks passed. He didn't show up unannounced. Didn't send gifts. Just sent one message a week through the bookstore manager. "Hope you're all well." Simple, respectful. Then, one afternoon, she got a call from the school. Sophia had fallen on the playground, scraped her knee badly. She was fine but shaken. The nurse asked if someone could pick her up. Her sister was out of town. Her mom was at work. Panic flickered until she remembered. She texted the bookstore manager, who passed the message along. 20 minutes later, he was at the school gate, calm and quiet. He didn't go inside, waited until she brought Sophia out. The little girl's eyes widened when she saw him. "You came," she said, voice small. "I said I would," he replied. He didn't take her hand, didn't carry her. Just walked beside them, asking gentle questions, making her laugh with a silly story about tripping over his own feet as a kid. By the time they reached the apartment, Sophia was holding his pinky finger. She watched it happen, not with jealousy but relief. He wasn't trying to replace her, he was just adding to their world. Slowly, carefully, he earned small moments. A Saturday morning at the park, a shared ice cream cone, sitting quietly in the back of the bookstore during story hour, listening as she read aloud. He never missed a chance to show up, but never assumed he belonged. One evening after the twins were asleep, she found him outside the bookstore again. This time, he wasn't watching through the window. He was planting flowers in the window boxes, marigolds and pansies, bright and hardy. "I thought the kids might like them," he said when she came out. "They bloom all summer." She leaned against the doorframe. "You don't have to do this." "I know," he said, brushing dirt from his hands. "I want to." They stood in silence for a while, the city humming around them. "Why now?" she finally asked. "Why come back after all this time?" He looked at her, really looked at her. "Because I finally understood something. Being a father isn't about being perfect. It's about being present. And I was so scared of failing that I failed by not even trying. I don't want to miss another moment." She didn't say anything, but she didn't walk away. A few weeks later, the twins had a school play. She sent him a note through the manager. "They have roles. You can watch from the back if you stay quiet." He came, sat in the very last row, cried when Sophia bowed, clapped so hard his hands turned red. Afterward, Leo ran to him. "Did you see me fly?" he asked, arms out like wings. "I saw," he said, smiling through tears. "You were the best rocket." That night, she left a small package on the bookstore bench. Inside were 2 framed photos, one of Sophia blowing out birthday candles, one of Leo asleep with a book on his chest. On the back, she'd written, "So you don't forget their faces." He started carrying them in his briefcase. Months turned into a year. He never pushed for more than she gave. Never asked to come inside the apartment. Never called himself Dad unless the twins did first. And slowly they started to. It began with Sophia saying, "Daddy, look," during a park visit. Then Leo whispering, "Good night, Daddy," after story hour. Small words, huge steps. She never rushed it, never forced it. Let them decide in their own time who he was to them. One spring day, almost exactly 5 years after he'd walked away, she found an envelope in her mailbox. No return address. Just her name. Inside was a legal document, the trust, now fully funded, with clear instructions that it would support the twins through college and beyond. Attached was a note. "I've stepped back from the company, taking time to be here, not for you, not even for me, for them. However you'll have me, however they'll have me, that's enough." She read it, then looked out the window. In the park across the street, he was sitting on a blanket with the twins, helping Sophia build a tower of blocks while Leo read him a story. Badly, proudly. She didn't go down, didn't need to. She just watched. He wasn't the man he'd been. And she wasn't the woman who'd packed boxes in the rain. They'd both been broken, both rebuilt, separately, painfully, honestly. And now, in this quiet corner of the world, something new was growing. Not a reunion, not a fairy tale, just a family, messy, healing, learning to trust again one small moment at a time. She smiled, tucked the letter away, and went to make dinner. Because tonight, for the first time in a long time, there would be 4 plates on the table.